Hello again, everybody. This is Rusty, aka William, aka Dr. Robinson, and I am the Blues Doctor. Welcome to my podcast, The Blues Doctor Recommends, and we're glad you're here. You know, the other day on another podcast, somebody asked me, did I want to be called Rusty? Did I want to be called William? Because it comes up both ways sometimes on the podcasting shows. And I don't care. I've been called much worse. So either one is fine with me. We're back in our Orange Beach studio this week, as you can probably tell. So we're doing well, and I hope you all are too. Please remember to ring the bell and subscribe and to share and make comments. You know, I love to read the comments, and we'll get on with the show. So for the calendar this week, we've got a couple of more really fun ones, I think. Starting with on May 1st, 1930, that was the birthday of Little Walter. Little Walter was born Marion Walter Jacobs. He was born in Rapides Parish, Louisiana, which is in central Louisiana. I've spent a lot of time there. Walter played the harmonica. He was maybe the most famous blues harmonica player ever. He started out playing with a variety of local and regional artists in the Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas area, but really became popular when he moved to Chicago and partnered with Muddy Waters at Chess Records, where he created what was likely his best music. He had a number of singles, including Country Boy, and maybe the most popular and most well known was My Babe. Walter was a kind of a pioneer in the harmonica. He got tired of not being able to be heard over the electric guitars, so he figured out if he picked up a microphone and cupped it around his harmonica and then plugged the microphone into a guitar amp, he could be heard. And as it turned out, the sound was different. It was distorted, it kind of echoed. So it gave the harmonica more of a presence in a blues band. He really placed the harmonica in the same realm as the electric guitar for live performances and recording. However, Walter was an alcoholic and he had a bad temper. And when he started drinking, he would get in fights and get arrested. He died, unfortunately, at age 37 in 1968 after he was beaten to death, basically, in a what was called a crooked dice game in an alley behind a club where he was playing in that night. It was on the south side of Chicago. And no one was ever prosecuted for the killing. You know, in those days, a black man who died in an alleyway on the south side of Chicago, he really was not paid much attention to by the police or the news or whatever. In fact, even his death certificate kind of revealed some of the lack of concern by Chicago authorities. His cause of death was listed as unknown or natural causes. So you can almost hear them saying, just another drunken N word, you know, in the black neighborhood in Chicago, and they didn't care. At any rate, without question, Walter expanded the music industry's appreciation of the harmonica dramatically. He really expanded the musical industry's expectations of what could be done with the harmonica, both in live and recorded music. Walter deservingly was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2008. He was at the time and still is the only primary harmonica player in that hall. Salute to Little Walter. And also on May 1st, this time in 1967, Elvis Presley married Priscilla Bellew at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Elvis met Priscilla in 1959 in Germany while Elvis was in the Army. Priscilla was the daughter of an American U.S. Air Force colonel who was stationed in Germany at the time, and Elvis met her there at a party. Somehow, Elvis convinced her father, the Air Force colonel, to let him take Priscilla to Memphis to live at Graceland. Now, how exactly he did that is beyond me, but he did. Elvis was discharged from the Army in 1961, went back to Memphis. Priscilla came in 1962. She moved into Graceland. She was chaperoned by Elvis's father, Vernon, and his Aunt Delta. As per Elvis' discussions with the colonel, Priscilla enrolled at Immaculate Conception High School, which is a all-girls Catholic school in Memphis, which I'm very familiar with. It was sort of the sister school to the all-boys Catholic school that I went to. So I dated a few IC girls in my time, much to the chagrin of my producer. At any rate, Priscilla graduated in 1964. Lisa Marie was born February 1st, 1968, 9 months to the day after the wedding. And sadly, they divorced in October of 1973 based on infidelity on both their parts. Priscilla had had several affairs, and Elvis had been certainly rumored, if not in reality, having affairs with several of his co-stars in the movies. Elvis had gone to Los Angeles to film a lot while Priscilla remained in Memphis at Graceland to take care of Lisa Marie. So that caused a strain on their relationship. So it unfortunately didn't work out. Priscilla is still alive today. She's 79 years old. She has homes in Memphis and Los Angeles and elsewhere. So Priscilla's had a fascinating life, and I hope she's doing well. So just so we talk about some current events also, this is the second weekend of Jazz Fest, May 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in New Orleans. The headliners have been terrific so far, and we've got some more good ones coming up. Santana headlined last night, Thursday night as we're recording this. Tonight's headliners are Luke Combs, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, and the Fabulous Thunderbirds. My friend, Guitar Slim Jr., plays today, Friday, also at 12:30. I actually ran into Slim a few days ago, and he told me how excited he was to get back to Jazz Fest. He actually had been out of the fest. He'd been in it for several years, but then he missed it starting with the pandemic, so he was happy to get back. So if you get a chance, I guess it's going to be too late when you see this, but if you ever get a chance in the future, look up Guitar Slim Jr. Tomorrow, Saturday, Kenny Wayne Shepherd and Bobby Rush are at the Blues Tent. Pearl Jam is on the festival stage as the headliner there. And there's a funny story about Pearl Jam and Eddie Vedder, who was their lead singer in New Orleans. Pearl Jam was playing in New Orleans in 1993 when Pearl Jam was pretty much at the height of their popularity. And one night after the show, Eddie Vedder went to the French Quarter and went to a strip club in the Quarter, as many young men who are away from home on the road working are apt to do. And when he went to the strip club, he unfortunately didn't follow the rules. Eddie started pinching and otherwise touching the girls as they would walk by and stuff, but he didn't pay for it. So you got to pay for it, unfortunately, or you don't get to touch them. Well, anyway, the bouncers saw him doing this and the girls were complaining. So the bouncers picked him up, they beat him up, and then they threw him out in the street just like they would any other guy who was doing that at a strip club in New Orleans. Oh, and they called the police at the same time. So the police came and picked him up and knocked him around a little bit more, and then they took him to jail. So Eddie spent the night in central lockup in New Orleans. He was let out on bail the next day. Pearl Jam's attorneys came to town and raised a stink about it. So they gave him a court date for several months in the future and turned him loose. At any rate, what usually happens when a entertainer or somebody famous gets a court date like that is when it actually comes to that time, the day of the arraignment, the entertainer will usually have like his attorney attend the proceedings and simply plead no contest or whatever and just pay the fine, whatever it is. Well, that didn't happen in this case. Actually, Eddie Vedder came to town himself for his court date. He even wore a suit and tie, amazingly. And this was all according to Keith Sparrow, who was the music reporter for the New Orleans newspaper, the Times-Picayune, for many years. Still is, in fact. At any rate, Eddie came in by himself, sat in court, and was ready to testify until the bouncers who testified before him and the police who testified couldn't get their story straight, and the judge threw the whole case out. So on the way out, Keith Sparrow stopped Eddie and said, "Well, what do you think about that?" He said, "Well, I wanted to testify." So Eddie was a little disappointed with how the trial went, but I guess he was glad he got off. Just another thought about Jazz Fest. You know, if you saw the podcast last week, you'll remember that John Fogerty was the headliner one night last weekend. And I was a big fan of John Fogerty when he was part of Creedence Clearwater Revival back in the late 60s, early 70s. So I did a little something in his honor.
Just got home from Illinois, locked the front door, oh boy. Got to sit down, take a rest on the porch. Imagination sets in, pretty soon I'm singing. Doo, 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 looking out my back door. Giants doing cartwheels, statues wearing high heels. Look at all the happy creatures dancing on the lawn. Dinosaur Victrola, listening to Buck Owens. Doo, 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 looking out my back door. mysterious apparition provided by magician. Do, 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 looking out my back door. Tambourines and elephants are playing in the band. Won't you take a ride on the flying spoon? Do do do, bother me tomorrow. Today I'll buy no sorrows. Do do do, looking out my back door. Forward troubles, Illinois. Lock the front door, oh boy. Look at all the happy creatures dancing on the lawn. Bother me tomorrow. Today I'll buy no sorrows. Do, 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 looking out my back door.
That was a great song written by John Fogerty while he was with Creedence Clearwater Revival, and I hope he was not too embarrassed by my version of it. For our medical moment this week, I'd like to stay with the topic of cancer. Specifically, I'd like to talk about the annual report from the National Cancer Institute, which was released a couple of weeks ago. This is a voluminous report. It has 31 pages and thousands of words. So, what I'd like to do is to discuss it in a series. In other words, to talk about it in several parts because there's a lot to unpack from all this information. So, today I'm just going to go over it in summary, sort of an abstract of it, so that you understand kind of what it's about. I think it might be best if I just read the background statement from the report itself. It says, this report represents a collaborative effort by the major cancer surveillance organizations to present the definitive U.S. statistics for cancer incidence and mortality. The data for the report was collected from a variety of places, including the Center for Disease Control's databases, the North American Association of Central Cancer Registries, also the NIH's National Vital Statistics Program. They collected all this data by cancer type, sex, race, ethnicity, age, and a variety of other things. They also looked at the potential impact of the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic on incidence of cancer as assessed by using state level registries. The report also looks at changes in the use of several cancer screening tools during the COVID pandemic, particularly the use of mammography. This was of interest to me because I actually was the reporter for that data from the state of Mississippi at the time. We reported on several different cancer screening tools, including mammography, pap smears and HPV testing, CT for lung cancer screening, and colonoscopy. All of that data was reported from the various states to a central database and was put together and analyzed and published. That data was actually used as part of the annual report from the NCI, which we're talking about today. The major results detailed in the report were interesting. The cancer incidence rates were basically stable from 2013 to 2021, with the exception of 2020, which was the early days of the COVID pandemic. The cancer death rates, again, were basically stable. The cancer death rate decreased by 1.5% per year. However, that was down a bit from 2.1% prior to that. Cancer incidence in 2020 declined, therefore, from pre pandemic levels for all the demographic groups combined. However, the magnitude of the decline was not strongly associated with any of the screening tests, including mammography or anything else, or even healthcare access or healthcare capacity during the COVID 19 pandemic. So, we're going to look at these results in detail over the next few weeks, particularly as to how they are associated with the cancer screening techniques that I mentioned before. This is the time in the podcast where I usually talk about high strangeness. And for this week, I'd like to start a new series on high strangeness in New Orleans based on the strange or unusual things that have happened in that city over the years. And there are plenty of them. This week, I'd particularly like to discuss Marie Laveau. She is a controversial figure. Some people viewed her as a something of a witch who performed black magic, and others considered her a lay healer or a community activist or even an advocate for the Catholic Church. Much of Marie's life and many of her activities are pretty unclear. We don't know all the details about them, but here's what we do know. Marie was born as a free woman of color in September 10th, 1801. We actually have her birth certificate in St. Louis Cathedral. She married a man named Jacques Paris in 1819. He dropped out of the picture after 1822, and she began viewing herself as a widow after that. Jacques actually came to New Orleans from Haiti in the wake of the Haitian Revolution. So he was considered a free man of color. We don't really know what happened to Jacques. Some people said he died in Baton Rouge. Others said he went overseas and supposedly was spotted in Europe. But at any rate, he was out of the picture. After that, Marie started living with another woman, or another man, excuse me, 1824. His name was Christophe de Glapion, and they were together until he died in 1855. And she had 15 children, we think, with Christophe. Marie died in June 15th, 1881, and we have the dates on that both from the St. Louis Cathedral and from the newspapers in New Orleans. Marie was a devoted Catholic. She was also a devoted voodoo practitioner. She was known as the third female leader of the voodoos in New Orleans. The other two were named first Sanate Dede and Marie Salapé. My apologies if I didn't pronounce that right. Marie worked as a hairdresser. She would do hairstyling out of her house, which was on St. Anne Street in the French Quarter, and she would also do call outs to the homes of the wealthy nouveau riche Americans in the Garden District in the pre Civil War days. Marie therefore learned a lot about her clients and kept a lot of her information that she got to herself to use specifically in her predictions and her advice and so forth. So people would come to her, women mostly, would come to her for advice or for gree sort of lucky charms to use, or for spells they could cast on say, a wayward lover or something else. And not just black women. White women from uptown would come to Marie also. They would frequently go in disguise because they didn't want their contemporaries to know they were visiting a black voodoo priestess. They would wear a jacket or a hat or something like that to cover up their expensive clothes and hairstyle and makeup and so forth. She held her famous ceremonies at multiple places, including her house on St. Anne Street or in Congo Square, which was just off the French Quarter, where the slaves would gather on Sundays to sing and dance and have a little time off, and also on Lake Pontchartrain, where Bayou St. John empties into it. Marie's magical abilities can't really be substantiated, although lots of them were claimed. She clearly mixed Roman Catholicism with voodoo entities from West Africa or Haiti, and even with some North American native spiritualism. At least one of her daughters, who became known as Marie Laveau, too, acted as a voodoo priestess also, which prompted rumors that Marie had not really died in 1881 because Marie Laveau, too, kept going till well into the 20th century. So there were sightings of Marie supposedly long after her death. Marie, too, was supposed to be particularly theatrical. She would use large snakes and fireworks and bonfires on her ceremonies, which were mostly on Lake Pontchartrain, and attracted large numbers of people to her ceremonies. The original Marie was buried in St. Louis Cemetery Number 1, and this is documented in the St. Louis Cathedral records. However, it's not exactly sure which tomb is hers. The tomb that most people presume to be Marie's, unfortunately, has been desecrated a number of times over the years. And unfortunately, the Archdiocese, which owns the cemetery, had to close the cemetery to the public in 2015. You can still enter St. Louis number one, but you have to be part of an organized tour group with a guide who is licensed and trained by the Archdiocese. Marie inspired many, many works of art, lots of songs from everyone from Dr. John to Elton John, among many others. She's inspired a number of books and movies and even TV. You may remember from the American Horror Story series, which was set in New Orleans. The Marie Laveau character was played by Angela Bassett, who did a great job, I thought, in playing that character. If you want to learn more about Marie Laveau, and there's lots more to know, I might suggest talking to Sally Ann Glassman. Her shop is the Island of Salvation Botanica. It's located just outside the French Quarter, and she is very happy to talk about voodoo in general or Marie Laveau in particular, and she's very friendly on top of it. Sally Ann is trained as a voodoo priestess and knows lots more about this topic than I do. So I don't claim to be any sort of an expert on Marie Laveau, but I think she is fascinating. That's about all I had for this week. We do have a couple of new friends of the podcast I'd like to mention. Billy Schilling, who is my buddy from Bigfoot Research. I always enjoy chatting with Billy. Also, Doug Hajicek and Jeff Perella of the Untold Radio AM podcast. I got to go on their podcast recently, and it was fascinating. Doug was also the producer of the TV show Finding Bigfoot, so he's a wealth of information. So, the Blues Doctor's prescription, I would encourage you to pursue more information about Marie Laveau and her life. It's really fascinating. Also, look up Jazz Fest. Maybe you can go next year. The dates for Jazz Fest 2026 are April 25th through May the 5th, and Jazz Fest typically runs Thursday through Sunday, and then again the following Thursday through Sunday. And then finally, look up the NCI's annual report on cancer. It's well worth a read. Finally, as I say each week, please watch next week's podcast, okay? See you later.